Imagine standing in the frozen silence of a Belgian forest on a bitter December morning in 1944, where the fate of the free world hung by a thread. Suddenly, from over a mile and a half away, far beyond what any soldier thought possible, a single American shot pierces the myth of the unstoppable German war machine, turning the tide of one of history's most desperate battles. This isn't just a tale of metal and fire, it's the story of ingenuity, courage, and the quiet revolution that saved countless lives. Stick around, because what you're about to hear will rewrite everything you thought you knew about armored warfare in World War II. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's last gamble, a massive surprise offensive launched on December 16, 1944, through the dense Ardennes region. Over 200,000 German troops, backed by more than 1,000 tanks and assault guns, smashed into American lines under cover of thick fog and heavy snow. The goal was audacious: split the Allied forces, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. American soldiers, caught off guard and undermanned, faced the full fury of elite panzer divisions. Roads turned to chaos as retreating units clogged narrow paths, and whispers spread of invincible German behemoths rolling unchecked through the winter landscape. At the heart of this terror were the King Tigers, officially the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Ausf. B. These monsters weighed nearly 70 tons, with frontal armor up to 185 mm thick, virtually impenetrable to most Allied weapons at standard combat ranges. Their 88 mm KWK-43 guns could obliterate a Sherman tank from over 2,000 yards, instilling fear that bordered on legend. German crews, battle-hardened from years on the Eastern Front, drove them with a confidence born of superiority. They believed nothing in the American arsenal could challenge them head-on, especially not in the open fields and rolling hills of the Ardennes. But hidden in the shadows of this unfolding disaster was a game-changer: the M36 Jackson tank destroyer. Developed in haste by American engineers, it was a far cry from the glamorous heavy tanks that captured headlines. Built on the chassis of the earlier M10 Wolverine, the M36 featured a lightly armored hull, only about 25 to 38 mm in places, and an open-top turret that exposed crews to the elements and enemy fire. It wasn't designed for brawling, it was a sniper on tracks, emphasizing speed, concealment, and precision over brute force. What made it revolutionary was its main armament, the 90 mm M3 gun, adapted from anti-aircraft designs and capable of firing high-velocity armor-piercing rounds that could punch through heavy steel at astonishing distances. The M36 origins traced back to the hard lessons of Normandy and beyond. After D-Day, American forces encountered Panthers and Tigers that outgunned their Shermans time and again. Reports flooded in from the front lines, tank crews describing hopeless duels where German shells ricocheted off their targets while Allied fire bounced harmlessly away. The U.S. Army's Tank Destroyer Command, tasked with countering enemy armor, realized their existing models, the M10 with its 76 mm gun and the speedy M18 Hellcat, fell short against the latest threats. In response, Ordnance Department teams worked around the clock, mating the powerful 90 mm cannon to a proven platform. The first prototypes rolled out in mid-1944, and by autumn, units like the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion were receiving them in Europe. Training was rushed but intensive. Crews, often drawn from artillery or infantry backgrounds, learned to exploit the M36 strengths. Its Ford GAA V8 engine provided a top speed of 26 miles per hour, allowing quick repositioning, and the gun's flat trajectory enabled accurate fire at ranges exceeding 2,500 yards. Ammunition was key. Alongside standard armor-piercing capped ballistic cap (APCBC) rounds, the M36 could use tungsten-cored hypervelocity armor-piercing (HVAP) projectiles, which boosted penetration by up to 50%. These were rationed, saved for the toughest foes, but when deployed, they transformed the battlefield. As the German offensive surged forward, M36 units were scattered across the front, often attached to infantry divisions in defensive roles. Near Ardennes, Belgium, on December 23, 1944, one such crew from the 628th Tank Destroyer Battalion exemplified this new doctrine. Positioned on a wooded ridge overlooking a vital crossroads, they scanned the misty horizon through binoculars. The air was crisp, frost-etching patterns on their vehicles, and tension built as radio chatter reported enemy sightings. Suddenly, shapes materialized in the distance, A column of king tigers, their massive silhouettes cutting through the fog like ghosts from a nightmare. The American commander, a seasoned sergeant with experience from Sicily and Italy, whispered orders to hold fire until the range was optimal. At approximately 2,600 yards, well beyond what German optics could reliably counter, the gunner aligned the crosshairs. The 90mm barked, sending a round arcing through the cold air. Seconds later, it struck the lead Tiger's turret mantle, sparking a shower of metal but failing to penetrate fully. Undeterred, the crew adjusted swiftly, factoring in wind and elevation. The second shot hit lower, exploiting a slight angle in the armor. Smoke billowed from the impact, and the Tiger ground to a halt, its crew scrambling to assess the damage. This engagement wasn't isolated. Across the Bulge, M36s operated in small platoons, using terrain like hills and forests for cover. Their doctrine emphasized shoot and scoot, fire a few rounds, then relocate before retaliation. In one notable action near L'Église, a single M36 disabled 3 Panthers in quick succession, forcing the Germans to reroute their advance and buying precious hours for reinforcements. These victories stemmed from more than just the gun. They relied on superior American logistics, which ensured steady supplies of fuel and ammo, contrasting sharply with German shortages. The psychological ripple was immense. German tankers, accustomed to dominating engagements, now faced uncertainty. Intercepted radio traffic revealed confusion, commanders questioning reports of mystery guns engaging from impossible distances. Morale dipped as advances stalled, compounded by worsening weather and Allied air sorties when skies cleared. For American troops, the M36 became a beacon of hope, proving that innovation could level the playing field against superior numbers. Yet, the Jackson's crews endured hardships that tested their resolve. The open turret meant constant exposure to snow and wind, leading to cases of hypothermia. Maintenance in sub-zero temperatures was grueling, with frozen tracks and iced-over sites demanding round-the-clock vigilance. Despite these challenges, their adaptability shone through, incorporating lessons from each skirmish to refine tactics. As the battle raged into Christmas, the M36 impact grew. Near Bastogne, besieged American paratroopers held out partly because tank destroyers like the Jackson disrupted German encirclements. One crew, operating under artillery barrage, managed to knock out a Tiger II at 2,900 yards, a feat later verified by ordnance experts. These stories, passed among units, fostered a sense of empowerment, reminding soldiers that victory was within reach through strategy and perseverance. The Ardennes offensive, meant to be a swift knockout, instead became a war of attrition where distance and precision trumped sheer power. The M36 Jackson, unassuming yet lethal, played a pivotal role in the shift, ensuring that the German push faltered just short of its objectives. As the snow deepened and the days blurred into one long, frozen nightmare, the German high command still believed victory was within reach. Fuel was running low, air support was almost non-existent, and entire divisions were burning through their last reserves, but the myth of the King Tiger remained unshaken in Berlin. Officers told their men that the Ardennes breakthrough was only delayed, not defeated. What they refused to accept was that a quiet American invention was quietly dismantling that myth one precise, long-distance shot at a time. Near the small crossroads village of Manhay on December 24, Christmas Eve, another chapter in this hidden war unfolded. Elements of the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion had moved their M36 Jacksons into position during the night, guided only by dim red flashlights and whispered coordinates. Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, a 26-year-old from Ohio who had survived the hedgerows of Normandy, chose his ground carefully. He placed his 3 vehicles along a gentle rise that overlooked a narrow, ice-covered road flanked by dense pine. The range to the choke point below was just under 2,800 yards, far enough that even the best German optics would struggle to pick out the low silhouettes against the snow-dusted ridge. Hayes understood something his enemies did not yet fully grasp. The 90mm gun was not merely powerful, it was consistent. When loaded with the new M82 armor-piercing round or the scarce but devastating T-33 HVAP projectile, it delivered energy that defied the cold, the distance, and the thick sloped armor of the King Tiger. His crews had drilled obsessively on range estimation, wind correction, and rapid reloading. They knew every second counted. One clean hit could stop an entire column. One missed shot could bring artillery crashing down on their exposed positions. Just after 11 a.m., the first German vehicles appeared through the thinning fog. 4 King Tigers led the way, followed by a mix of Panthers and half-tracks carrying infantry. The tanks moved slowly, commanders' heads visible above the cupolas, scanning nervously. They had already lost vehicles to mysterious long-range fire over the past week, and caution had replaced arrogance. But caution was not enough. Hayes waited until the lead King Tiger reached the exact pre-measured marker, a shattered pine stump half buried in snow. He gave the order in a calm voice that belied the pounding in his chest. The first M36 fired. The sharp crack echoed across the valley, flatter and higher pitched than the heavier German 88 mm. The round traveled for almost 3 full seconds before it struck the King Tiger's front glacis plate at a near-perfect angle. A bright flash, then a puff of dark smoke. The massive tank lurched forward, then stopped dead. Its turret never even began to turn. Inside, the driver and gunner were killed instantly by the spalling fragments that ricocheted through the fighting compartment. Before the Germans could react, the second M36 fired. This round caught the next King Tiger just below the mantlet. The projectile punched through, detonating the ammunition stored in the rear of the turret. A brilliant orange fireball erupted skyward, followed by secondary explosions that tore the roof apart. The burning wreck slewed sideways, blocking the road. Panic spread instantly. Infantry leapt from the half-tracks and scattered into the trees. The remaining Panthers opened fire blindly toward the ridge, their shells exploding harmlessly in the snow hundreds of yards short. The third M36 joined the fight, targeting the rearmost King Tiger as it attempted to reverse. A single HVAP round struck the thinner side armor at an oblique angle. The tank shuddered, smoke pouring from the engine deck, then rolled to a stop, flames licking upward. In less than 90 seconds, 3 of Hitler's most feared tanks had been reduced to burning hulks, without the Americans ever coming within a mile of direct counterfire. Word of the Manhei ambush traveled fast through American lines. Exhausted paratroopers defending Bastogne heard the story that night and passed it along in hushed, almost reverent tones. The M36 was no longer just another vehicle. It was proof that the enemy's greatest strength could be turned against them. Tank destroyer crews began receiving quiet respect from infantry units that had once viewed them with skepticism. Every destroyed King Tiger meant fewer shells falling on foxholes, fewer friends lost in hopeless close-range fights. For the Germans, the psychological damage was even deeper. After-action reports from surviving officers described growing dread. Tank commanders started refusing orders to advance across open ground without infantry screens and artillery preparation. Some crews abandoned damaged vehicles rather than risk exposure while attempting repairs. The once aggressive Panzer spearheads slowed to a crawl, probing cautiously, hesitating at every ridgeline and forest edge. That hesitation cost hours, then days, time the Germans could not afford. Yet the M36 crews paid dearly for each victory. The open turret, so useful for rapid observation, became a deadly liability whenever German artillery found their position. Shrapnel rained down, wounding men who could not duck below armor that did not exist. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Exhaustion set in after days without real sleep. Ammunition trucks struggled to reach forward positions through clogged, snow-choked roads. HVAP rounds remained in short supply, forcing gunners to choose targets with grim precision. Still, they kept fighting. Each engagement refined their tactics. Crews learned to fire from defilade, using just the gun barrel and sight exposed above the crest. They mastered shoot and scoot to near perfection, firing 2 or 3 rounds, then pulling back hundreds of yards before the Germans could zero in. The combination of American industrial output, tactical flexibility, and raw courage began to tilt the balance. By late December, the German timetable lay in ruins. Fuel shortages grounded many vehicles. Clear skies finally allowed Allied fighter bombers to return, turning roads into killing zones. And everywhere the panzers tried to push, they encountered the same invisible threat: thin-skinned American tank destroyers that killed from distances they had once considered safe. The M36 Jackson did not win the Battle of the Bulge alone. But it ensured that when the German offensive finally broke, it broke against a weapon most of their commanders never saw coming, until it was already too late. By the final days of December 1944, the Ardennes no longer looked like the lightning thrust Hitler had promised his generals. It looked like a graveyard of steel and shattered ambition. Roads that were supposed to carry German armor deep into Belgium were now choked with the husks of panthers, tigers, and king tigers, many of them stopped forever by the same quiet weapon few German officers had even heard named before the offensive began. The M36 Jackson had not announced itself with fanfare. It had simply arrived, waited, watched, and killed from distances that rewrote the rules of armored combat. Near the town of Marquet on December 30th, one of the war's most extraordinary long-range engagements took place. A platoon from the 772nd Tank Destroyer Battalion had positioned 3 M36s on a low, snow-covered hill that commanded a wide, open valley. The crews had spent the previous night digging in, piling snow around the vehicles to break up their outlines, and marking exact ranges to several prominent landmarks below. Sergeant Thomas Callahan, a soft-spoken gunner from Pennsylvania who had once repaired farm tractors, now commanded the lead vehicle. He understood ballistics the way a hunter understands wind and distance. His crew trusted him completely. At 9:47 a.m., a German column appeared at the far end of the valley, 5 tanks strong, including 2 King Tigers and 3 Panthers, escorted by a handful of half-tracks. The range was staggering, just under 3,000 yards. Most gunners would have considered it hopeless. Callahan did not. He had studied every report, every test firing, every captured piece of German armor plating. He knew exactly where the weak points lay when a shot came in at the right angle. The first round left the muzzle with a clean, piercing crack. It flew for nearly 4 seconds before striking the lead King Tiger's turret mantlet. The impact produced a brilliant spark and a puff of gray smoke, but the tank kept moving. Callahan adjusted elevation by a fraction of a degree. The second shot hit 6 inches lower, catching the curved transition between the mantlet and the glassy plate. This time the round punched through. A jet of flame shot backward from the breech, followed by a gout of black smoke. The King Tiger slewed violently to the right and stopped, its engine deck burning fiercely. The crew bailed out and ran for the nearest tree line. Before the Germans could locate the source of the fire, Callahan's crew reloaded and fired again, this time at the second King Tiger, which had begun to turn its turret in confusion. The HVAP round struck the side armor at an oblique angle, just forward of the turret ring. The penetration was catastrophic. Ammunition cooked off almost immediately, sending the turret spinning off its race like a child's top before it crashed into the snow 50 feet away. The explosion was so violent, it could be felt through the ground nearly a mile distant. The remaining Panthers scattered, firing wildly toward the hill. Their shells fell short by hundreds of yards, throwing up harmless fountains of snow. The M36s held position only long enough to confirm the kills, then pulled back into the reverse slope, disappearing before German artillery could respond. In under 2 minutes, 2 of the most heavily armored tanks in the world had been destroyed from a range that should have rendered them untouchable. These kinds of actions repeated across the collapsing front. M36 crews learned to exploit every fold in the terrain, every minute of poor visibility, every second of German hesitation. They became masters of ambush, turning the very distance that once favored the enemy into their greatest ally. Each destroyed heavy tank bought time. Time for Patton's Third Army to swing north, time for Montgomery's forces to stabilize the northern shoulder, time for the skies to clear and let Allied air power finish what the ground forces had started. For the German tank crews, the change was devastating. The sense of invincibility that had carried them through France and the early days of the Bulge evaporated. Commanders grew reluctant to expose their vehicles in open country. Infantry screens were demanded at every move. Reconnaissance patrols doubled, then tripled. Yet no matter how careful they became, the invisible 90mm rounds kept finding them. Through fog, through snow, through the confidence that heavy armor alone could win wars. By January 1945, the offensive was over. The Germans retreated, leaving behind hundreds of burned-out vehicles, thousands of dead, and a legend in ruins. The M36 Jackson never received the glory of the Sherman or the Thunderbolt. It was never meant to. Its crews did not charge across fields or duel at point-blank range. They waited. They calculated. They fired once, twice, sometimes 3 times, and then they vanished. When the war ended months later, the M36 remained in service through the final push into Germany, quietly protecting flanks and covering open ground. Its crews rarely spoke of their role in public. They didn't need to. They knew what they had done. They had faced the most feared tanks on Earth and beaten them. Not with thicker armor or faster engines, but with range, precision, ingenuity, and nerve. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge was not decided by a single weapon. It was decided by thousands of small, ruthless decisions made under impossible conditions. And among those decisions, the long, deliberate shots of the M36 Jackson crews stand out as some of the most decisive of all. They did not shout their victories. They simply proved, shot by shot, that no armor was invincible, no distance was safe, and no myth could survive reality forever. The King Tiger died in the snow of the Ardennes, and the quiet men who killed it never asked for thanks. They just kept their guns loaded and their eyes on the horizon, ready for whatever came next.